विहारे।
जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय गोपी जन वल्लभ जय गिरिवरधारे। जय गोपी जन वल्लभ जय गिरिवरधारे।
जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी।
अथ श्रीमद्भगवद्गीता प्रथमोऽध्यायः।
So greetings and welcome to everyone once again. So we are continuing this ongoing session of hearing and sharing from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. In the last two sessions you all have already heard the introduction and the first verse of Bhagavad Gita from the first chapter. So today we will continue the reading and we will discuss from verses 2 and 3 because they are related, and we will see what is being spoken about in these verses in continuation of what we have seen within the overall context of what Bhagavad Gita has to give us, and specifically what these two verses are telling us. So we will read the Sanskrit verse and then we'll go through the word for word equivalence, and then we will look at the translation. So we have some understanding of what the verse is speaking about. And then we'll pick up some key points or messages from the commentary to this Bhagavad Gita for these two verses. Verse number 2, chapter 1, observing the armies. Sanjaya uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudham duryodanastada acharyam upasangabhya raja vachanam abravit. Sanjaya uvacha, Sanjaya said, Drishtva, after seeing, tu but, Pandava Anikam, the soldiers of the Pandavas, Vyudham, arranged in a military phalanx, Duryodhanaha, King Duryodhana, Tada, at that time, Acharyam, the teacher, Upasangamya, approaching, Raja, the king, Vachanam, words, Abravit, spoke. Translation: Sanjaya said, O king, after looking over the army arranged in military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhana went to his teacher and spoke the following words. Let's look at the next verse also. Verse number 3. Pashyetam Panduputranam Acharya Mahatim Chamum Vyudham Drupadaputrena Tava Shishyena Dhimata. Pashya, behold, etam, this, Panduputranam, of the sons of Pandu, Acharya, O teacher, Mahatim, great, Chamum, military force, Vyudham, arranged, Drupadaputrena, by the son of Drupada, Tava, your, Shishyena, disciple, Dhimata, very intelligent. Translation: O my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupada. So what is being spoken about in these two verses in continuation? Before we get into this, let's just look at the quick background or introduction or the context to these set of verses. So we have seen that this Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And Kurukshetra, as we all know, is a very, very religious place, and even today it exists and people go there, especially on the day of solar eclipse, to perform some religious ceremonies and rites. And hence it is a very, very respected place and has been existing since the days of yore, very, very old place. So this place was specifically chosen for this battle because this was a battle unlike other battles that we see today in the modern world, where people fight more for their personal agendas, some underlying motives. But this battle was not like that. This battle was fought to establish religious principles. And that was the reason why, even though the war resulted in a huge massacre which is unparalleled in history, yet this war is always glorified in our scriptures and in all the philosophical theses and writings. This war is glorified because it established religion. So for a higher purpose, even though there was an act of violence that was committed, still it is considered high or very moral in that sense. And we may ask that we are not in a battlefield like situation in our lives. So how is this Bhagavad Gita relevant in our daily lives? But we must understand, if we contemplate and think about this very closely, even though we may not be in a physical war or battle like situation, but we are actually always battling inside our thoughts, inside our heart. So many battles are going on constantly, right from the time we get up in the morning till we go to sleep. There are multiple thoughts that keep coming inside our mind, and they are battling against each other. And then we, as a person, we have to decide what is the right course of action based on these thoughts. Because the thoughts first come in the mind, then we start meditating on it or start contemplating on it, and then finally we act on it. So this process, which means that our actions ultimately depend on our thoughts. So the more better our thoughts are, or more higher our thoughts are, the better our action will be, and the outcome of that action will also be accordingly better or higher or lower. So this is a very important principle that we understand from Bhagavad Gita, that even though this was a battle of good versus evil, it is not so much to say that this person is good or that person is bad. It is more within these good and bad thoughts that exist within one individual. And we, as those individuals, are having this constant battle between good and bad thoughts inside us. We don't have to go outside and look for good or bad. They all exist within us. It is said in the Kali Yuga, the age that we are in currently, all these bad thoughts and the good thoughts simultaneously reside within one individual. In the previous ages, mostly the goodness was prevailing inside, and there was elements of badness as well, but they were presiding outside. So they could choose, they could see good versus evil clearly outside. But all these things exist within an individual in this age of Kali. And Kali means the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. And that is why these dualities exist within us. And that is where Bhagavad Gita is relevant to each and every one of us, irrespective of the faith that we follow, irrespective of the place where we are in, irrespective of the circumstances we are in. Each and every individual or each and every living being in this world, this Bhagavad Gita is relevant to each and every one of us, and that is why it becomes a practically significant philosophical thesis, and not just something for armchair philosophy or just to talk about and then forget about it. No, it has practical relevance in our day-to-day life. So let's try to see some of these aspects as we go through this verses, and that is when it becomes very, very relevant for us. So we see that in the Mahabharata, which is where the Bhagavad Gita appears in Mahabharata. And as I said, it appears it was born in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So in the first verse we saw Dhritarashtra, who is the father of the Kauravas. And we know that the Kauravas were 100 in number and the Pandavas are only 5. So we may see that this war is not a justified war. It is not a fair equation where there are 100 brothers on one side and plus their armies, and 5 brothers on one side plus their armies. So how is this a war? How is this a justified war? So from Dhritarashtra's mind is revealed in the first verse when he is asking. First of all, we saw that how Dhritarashtra is very discriminative, right? He says immediately, he asking Sanjaya that my sons and the sons of Pandu, even though they're part of the same family, but he's creating the differentiation or discriminative attitude is there in his thoughts, where he's discriminating between his sons and sons of his brother Pandu. So this discrimination is to some extent natural in every living individual, right? For example, we all have families. We are, most of us are in a family situation where we are married and we have children. So it's natural that we are more close to our children than maybe children belonging to other people. That's natural. But the point of discrimination that Bhagavad Gita is telling us, that what must be avoided is that discrimination which causes unnecessary harm to other entities, other living beings. That is the discrimination which is condemned in the Bhagavad Gita, not the general kind of discrimination which is always there. So that cannot be avoided. Like I said, the example of father and his children versus other children, there will be some discrimination. It's natural, but that discrimination is fine because there is no harm caused to anyone else as a result of that discrimination. But the discrimination that is manifested by Dhritarashtra is extremely harmful, because this whole life he was always trying to harm the sons of Pandus, his own nephews. They're from the same family. We can see, right? So even though they were the same family, but his attachment was towards his sons, Duryodhana and his brothers, versus sons of Pandu. So this discrimination actually caused a lot of harm to the Pandavas. In the Mahabharata, we can see that when they were sent to the exile and they were in a palace of lakhs, they were almost burned down in the palace of lakhs. So lakh. So in this way, we can see that Duryodhana and his brothers tried to cause so much harm to the Pandavas. Yet, because the Pandavas were righteous, as is mentioned in these set of verses that we are seeing, the sons of Pandu were always righteous. And that is the reason why Dhritarashtra was always skeptical about the outcome of the battle, even though on the physical front they were much stronger than the Pandavas, right? But somehow or the other, inside his heart, Dhritarashtra knew that he is on the wrong side. So this is the greatness of what Bhagavad Gita is revealing us. Is revealing us the heart of everyone, revealing us what are the inner thoughts in the minds of everyone. It is not possible for us to ordinarily understand what is going on in the minds and hearts of other people. What to speak of others? Sometimes we ourselves, we don't know what is going inside our own mind and hearts. But Bhagavad Gita, being timeless, ageless wisdom, is revealing us what is in the heart of other living entities. How do we understand, not to so much in terms of discriminate, but at least for us to understand what is going on and how to appreciate the good and the bad. Even bad, sometimes we have to appreciate, because bad things teach us valuable lessons in life. Bad experiences teach valuable experiences. It's a very, very valuable experience in our life. So we should not have this kind of discriminative attitude that what is good, what is bad. As I said, it all exists within all of us. So we simply have to nurture the good so that the bad automatically goes away. And that is the basis of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. That how do we nurture the good in us and also nurture the good in others, right? So Dhritarashtra, the history to this battle is useful to understand. As we know, Dhritarashtra was blind from birth. Although he was the eldest son of the Kurus, his brother Pandu was younger than him, and so rightfully Dhritarashtra should have accepted the throne. But due to the wise advice of Bhishma and Vidura, who was a very wise counsel or a prime minister, they advised that it is not so nice to have a blind person as a king. This is not to discriminate against the physical disabilities or something like that. No, as a king, one has to be very diplomatic and political, because that is the only way a king can properly rule a kingdom. Now, if person is blind, when he is talking to other people, especially the rival kings, so if somebody is blind, you will not be able to understand what is actually going on in their in the mind. Sometimes we say that the face is the index of the mind. So if you say somebody's face, we can understand what is going on in the mind, right? So if a person is blind, obviously he will be completely averse to this kind of understanding. So that was one of the reasons why Vidura and Dhritarashtra advised against Dhritarashtra to become king. But instead of accepting it as his fate, Dhritarashtra actually internally revolted against it. Although externally he did not show so much, he was still kind of accepting Pandu as a king, but internally he was crying, and he was really trying to avenge what has happened to him. And because he lost the kingdom, somehow or the other, when his sons were born, he wanted to have his eldest son Duryodhana to become the king. And that is the whole plot of Mahabharata, ultimately culminating in the battle. That how he was trying to diplomatically, politically trying to maneuver the Pandavas so that somehow or the other they would not get the kingdom and his son would be established as the king. And that is why his name is Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra means one who is too attached to Rashtra or kingdom kingdom means just becoming the, not only just becoming the king, but also family and possessions, anything that to do with the body. Too much attachment to that, such an individual can be called Dhritarashtra. So even in our own life, if we have such characteristics of too much of attachment to our body and bodily possessions, then we also come under the category of being called Dhritarashtra. Although physically we may not be blind, but because we are spiritually or philosophically blind, then we also are called Dhritarashtra. So that is what we have to learn from Bhagavad Gita, that how we should behave in a manner that we are not called Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra, because he carried this humiliation throughout his life, he wanted to somehow or the other make his son Duryodhana the king, and that is where this battlefield becomes a decisive moment where the winner of this battle would ultimately gain the kingdom. So we know that because he was blind, he was sitting there in his courtroom, and his assistant Sanjaya, who had a divine vision, it's like a television where he was sitting in the room in the palace, but he could see what is going on in the battlefield. This was a special mercy of his guru Vyasadeva, who gave him that spiritual power to see what is going on in the battle. This was all possible in those days, but even now it is possible. If we develop spiritual power, all this is possible. But people generally don't, believe all these things. That's why they say all this is mythology. But factually, hearing from the great personalities, we do understand that all this is true. But anyway, it's a separate matter. So Sanjaya here is trying to describe the battlefield situation to Duryodhana. So the first question itself, we may ask, why is he asking this question? Naturally, if people have assembled on the battlefield, they have not assembled to have a picnic or have a party. It's natural that they have assembled to fight. So why that question that Dhritarashtra is asking? What are my sons and the sons of Pandu doing on the battlefield? Actually this reveals his inner, as I said, Bhagavad Gita is telling us what is actually going on in his heart and mind. So it's revealing the thoughts inside Dhritarashtra's mind. It's not externally he's asking what are they doing, but actually he's worried, as we have seen in the commentary. He's worried about the outcome of the battle, because he knows within the deep inside his heart, he knows that his sons are not on the right side, and he's holding himself responsible, because as a father's responsibility is to guide his children. So it's natural that one must be properly situated so that he can guide his children and dependents properly. So he's feeling that, and that is why he's asking. And Sanjaya is also very smart. He understood the mind of his master Dhritarashtra, and that is why in the second verse that we just read, he is speaking now in response to Dhritarashtra's question. He is saying that, O king, after looking over the army arranged in military formation by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhana went to his teacher and spoke the following words. So he's trying to kind of giving some consolation to Dhritarashtra, that don't worry, your sons are not suddenly changing their mind and saying that, okay, because they have felt that they are not on the right side, they are going to retract from the battle and give the kingdom over to Pandavas. That's not going to happen. So don't worry, they are definitely going to fight. And that is what is confirmed by Sanjaya when he said that now Duryodhana, after assessing, because in the battlefield we always have to assess the opposite army's strength. That's the war tactic, right? We have to assess what is on the other side, assess their weaknesses, strength. We do SWOT analysis, right? In the modern parlance, we use SWOT analysis. So so he did the SWOT analysis of his opposite side, and as a result of that, whatever information he could gather, he went to discuss with his guru Dronacharya, who is also the commander-in-chief of the army. So when he went and consulted, so now he's going to ask. He's going to give his opinion of what the opposite army situation is, and also assess the relative strengths and weaknesses of his own side. And in discussion with the commander, then they would take a decision as to whether any strategy needs to be changed, any tactics need to be changed before the battle starts. So all this was going on as per a very proper principles. There was no attack from the back or something like that. It was a very religiously fought battle. Unlike today's situation where anything can happen from anywhere, people say something but they do something else. But this was not the situation in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And that is why the importance of Kurukshetra being a very religious place also becomes very important. Because in such a place, it's a holy place, it's a very pious place, one has to follow the religious principles, even when it comes to fighting wars. So now Duryodhana is going to speak. And in a very diplomatic way, he's trying to remind his teacher. In the third verse, he says, "O my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupada." So he's kind of mocking his guru, because there is a history behind this. Maybe we'll just talk about it in a few minutes. What is this history of Drupada's son being trained by Dronacharya? So when Dronacharya and Drupada, they were young, they were students in the ashram, in the Gurukul, both were very thick friends, very good friends. But Drupada, as we know, he was the royal heir to the kingdom, and Dronacharya was a very poor Brahmana. He came from a very modest background. So when it was time to finish the education and go their separate ways, Drupada promised to Dronacharya that if and when you need any help in terms of monetary or economic assistance, please feel free to come and approach me anytime. He told him that I will give you half of my kingdom. All right, so that is the promise he made at the time when they departed the Gurukul after finishing their education. And after that, many years went by. Drupada became a king, and they were not so much in touch because there was no WhatsApp or Facebook, those days where they could be in touch. So they went the separate ways. Drupada became the king of Panchala, and he was ruling his kingdom. Dronacharya came back, and he was continuing his very modest living, and it was becoming more and more difficult because he was not so much, he did not have a proper employment in terms of, so he was a Brahmana. At the same time, he was a military teacher. So he was not so much interested in doing the typical Brahmanical activities of conducting sacrifices, yajnas and things like that. He was more interested in doing some military training, and there were not enough opportunities at that time. So he was in a very, very materially poor condition. So he and his wife and his son Ashwathama, it is said in Mahabharata that Ashwathama did not even have proper food to eat. So his mother used to give some wheat balls, wheat soaked in water, and then she used to make balls and give it to him to eat, telling him that this is a sweet. So that was a very terrible condition in which they were living their days. So at this time, he remembered the promise given by his friend Drupada. So naturally, out of friendly relation, out of friendly love, he approached Drupada. But Drupada had become so proud and puffed up because of being a king and a very powerful king. He completely forgot about what he had said and even ignored Dronacharya when he approached him. He said that it is not up to my status to even talk to such people. So that is how cruel he was to his friend. So his friendship was not really based on, heart-to-heart relationship. It was based on the material position and designations one have. So that is also we learn from this Mahabharata that true friendship means it crosses all boundaries of anything to do with the material condition, whether it is poor, rich, any condition, old, young. That real friendship always lasts. We know from our own lives that when we have relationships of friendship with our old friends, we still maintain the friendship, irrespective of whatever conditions we or they are in, right? We maintain the relationship. That is how a true friendship is. But here Drupada was completely opposite. He completely forgot what a true friendship is. And he completely ignored and almost derided Dronacharya to the point that did not even allow him to come to the kingdom and asked him to go away empty-handed. Now Dronacharya, being a Brahmana, normally Brahmanas are very tolerant, but he was also a very powerful military teacher. So the Kshatriya spirit was also very, very active in Dronacharya. And he took it as a personal insult, and he thought that I have to take revenge against his insult. So when he got an opportunity to train the Pandavas and the Kauravas in their military education, after training them perfectly, he asked for Guru Dakshina. The Guru Dakshina was that you have to go to, that the students, that is Pandavas and Kauravas, have to go to Drupada's kingdom, defeat him, bind him in ropes and bring him to Dronacharya. That was the assignment in the form of Guru Dakshina that was given to these boys. So all the boys went, the Kauravas went first, Dronacharya, Duryodhana and all went. They couldn't do it. They got defeated themselves in the battle. But Arjuna was finally sent along with his brothers. And finally Arjuna managed to capture Dronacharya because he was Drupada. He was so powerful in archery. By the expert grace of Dronacharya, he became very expert in archery. So he captured Drupada and brought him in front of Dronacharya. And that is when Dronacharya then forcibly he took 50% of his kingdom. And in that way, Drupada was humiliated. So he felt humiliated. Instead of accepting that, it was my mistake because of which now this correction has happened, he wanted to further counteract, right? So this is the nature of this material world. One action leads to another, and this reactions and actions and reactions keep continuing, in relationships. That is why this age is called Kali Yuga, the age of conflict. We don't accept easily. We keep fighting, keep counteracting to the point that we cannot do anything anymore. But Drupada was not willing to give up. So he wanted to counteract. So he performed a huge sacrifice in which he wanted a son who would finally kill Dronacharya in battle. And that son was Drishtadyumna. So he was already blessed to kill Dronacharya. And Dronacharya knew this very well because he was a Brahmana, very powerful Brahmana. So he had the prowess to understand that this has happened. A son has been born to Drupada just to kill him. So he came one day to approach Dronacharya because he wanted to learn military education. Now, normally, what would anyone do? Knowing that this person is going to kill me, why would I want to impart military training to him? But Dronacharya, here we see the character of Dronacharya, that he was a Brahmana, by the way. And Brahmanas, we know, have extremely high, moral character. And they are extremely powerful in their spiritual power. And they are very tolerant. They are always absorbed in studying the scriptures, living a very simple, austere lifestyle. Of course, in Dronacharya's case, it was a mix of Brahmana and Kshatriya spirit, as we said, because of this military education. But nevertheless, the Brahmanical principles were quite alive in Dronacharya. And knowing fully that he is the person going to kill him, still he decided to impart the training. Because as per the Vedic principles, if a student who is qualified approaches a teacher, the teacher cannot say no. That was the Vedic principle, and we see the character of these great personalities, how they were sticking to the Vedic principles, religious principles, never deviating from that. Today we don't see it so much. We don't even. People don't even know what religious principle is. What to speak of following it. So again, here Bhagavad Gita comes to our rescue, that is giving us the timeless wisdom of all these principles and how those principles can be applied in today's world. That is a practical relevance of Bhagavad Gita. So anyway, Dronacharya decided to impart education to him, and he became a very expert commander, and he became the commander-in-chief of the Pandavas now. So you have Dronacharya on the Kaurava side and Drishtadyumna on the Pandava side. And now that is why Duryodhana, as he is approaching his teacher or commander-in-chief Dronacharya, he is kind of mocking him, but very diplomatically mocking him, saying that, you made a mistake of training this disciple, and now see, he is fully trained and standing in the opposite side, ready to kill you. So please don't make the same mistake now as you fight the battle. Because he knew very well that Dronacharya was very favorable toward the Pandavas. Because the Pandavas were liked by everyone. Why? Because they were always very righteous, very obedient to elders, very cultured, very pious. These are the characteristics of Pandavas, and the Kauravas were exact opposite, although they're part of the same family. So this also tells us how the upbringing of children is so important to pass on this cultural heritage or the values to them. And in our own life, as the parents behave or act, so do the children follow. So it's very important that in order for us to pass these good values or good moral characters down to the next generation, it's very important that we as parents or elders follow it first. And that is what we see in the life of Pandavas and Kauravas. Because the Kauravas followed Dhritarashtra, who was not righteous at all, they also became impious. Whereas Pandavas, throughout their character, throughout their life, they were always in the association of very pious people. Their own father, their mother, they were all very pious people. And hence, this piety was something that they inherited and they continued in their life. So, Dronacharya was also very favorable toward the Pandavas, and especially Arjuna, who was his favorite disciple. Right? So that is why Duryodhana is telling Dronacharya now that please don't be lenient. I know that you are very favorable to Pandavas, but this is a battle. In the battlefield, there is no personal preference. Nothing of these should play any role. We should forget about all these things and just fight a battle sincerely with an only objective to kill the enemy or destroy the enemy. So now he's kind of mocking him and telling him that you already made a mistake in the case of Drishtadyumna. Don't make the same mistake again in the case of Pandavas. Although you are lenient to them, but please fight the battle with full grit and without any personal preference. So that is how he's coming now to speak to Dronacharya to assess the relative strengths of his army and the army on the opposite side. So somehow the other Duryodhana also feels now, because initially when he thought that in the battlefield it is said that Kauravas had 11 Akshauhini armies, and Akshauhini, the meaning of Akshauhini means it's like lakhs and lakhs of horses, chariots, and various other weapons and soldiers as well. There is a specific definition which is given in Mahabharata, that so many lakhs of elephants, so many lakhs of soldiers, foot soldiers. So it's a huge army. Whereas Pandavas had only 3 or 4 Akshauhinis, which is much lesser in number.
And as we said, 100 brothers versus 5 brothers. So naturally the equation was completely lopsided. Yet Duryodhana, when he assessed the army of the Pandavas, he was taken aback. And that is what this verse also reveals, that his mind is again revealed here. Bhagavad Gita is revealing us the mind of Duryodhana, which normally we cannot understand others' mind, as I said earlier. So here Duryodhana's mind is revealed that he's also feeling a little bit of setback, surprise at seeing the army of the Pandavas, how wonderfully they were arranged. And especially Drishtadyumna, who had become the commander-in-chief, and now based on the context we have seen that how Drishtadyumna is already qualified to kill Dronacharya because he's blessed to kill him. So now he's coming, and in the following verses we will see from next week that how Duryodhana is doing the relative assessment of each of their armies, the opposite's army as well as their own army. So that we will reserve for next session. So I will stop here. I hope that this has given you some a better appreciation, better understanding of the flow of the verses continuing from the last week. And we hope that we will have these discussions in the future. And I sincerely hope and pray that you also get some encouragement and hope from Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is a universal philosophical treatise which is going to help everyone in every walk of life, irrespective of whatever conditions we are in. If we sincerely take instructions from Gita and try to implement and imbibe in our life, based on the words of great souls, we can say with full guarantee that it is going to change our life as well, for the good, for the better. So thank you very much for patiently hearing, and we look forward to meeting you again in future. Thank you.
अथ श्रीमद्भगवद्गीता प्रथमोऽध्यायः।
Your performance is getting worse. You will have fewer chances of getting promoted. If you're wondering why is my life stagnant, why can't I get my dream promotion achieved even though I'm working so hard? You might be getting confused with a lot of other questions. Don't worry. Being a dream coach, Steve can help you. I understand your current situation and can help you in achieving your dream. The first step is to have a dream, and you've already succeeded there. Let me do a free assessment for you. Let's start to reboot your life. Once you're done with coaching, congratulations. You're just a few steps away from achieving your dream. Feel free to visit my Facebook page for more information. Visit www.mrdreambiginitiative.com or email me at steve@mrdreambiginitiative.com.